Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Gongsun Jiuniang. In the case of Yu Qi, who rebelled against the Qing government, the most affected were the counties of Qixia and Liang. Qing soldiers would sometimes capture hundreds of people in a single day, executing them all in the Yanwu ground. Blood flowed like rivers, and corpses piled up like mountains. Local officials, moved by the plight of the deceased, donated money to buy coffins for them. As a result, the coffin shops in Jinan were completely emptied. Most of those executed were buried in the southern outskirts of Jinan. In the 13th year of the Kangxi reign, a scholar from Liang came to Jinan. Because 2 or 3 of his close friends were also executed, he bought some paper money and offered sacrifices for them in the wilderness. Afterwards, he rented a house near a temple and settled there. The next day, the scholar from Liang went into the city on business and had not returned by nightfall. Suddenly, a young man arrived at his room. Finding the scholar absent, he took off his hat, climbed onto the bed, and lay back with his shoes on. When asked by the servant who he was, he simply closed his eyes and remained silent. Not long after, the scholar from Liang returned. In the dim twilight, it was difficult to recognize the visitor, so he approached the bed to inquire in person. The man stared and said, "I am here to wait for your master. Do you suspect me of being a robber?" The scholar laughed and replied, "The master is right here." The young man hastily got up, put on his hat, bowed to him, and then sat down, engaging in enthusiastic conversation. Hearing the voice of the visitor, the scholar felt a sense of familiarity and quickly called for a lamp to be lit, recognizing the visitor as Zhu Sheng from the same county, one of those killed in the incident involving Yu Qi. The scholar was greatly shocked and attempted to flee, but Zhu Sheng grabbed him, saying, "Though I am now a ghost, the memories of friendship with you linger in my heart and cannot be forgotten. Today, I come to see you, hoping you will not disdain me because of my ghostly form." The scholar sat back down and asked why he had come. Zhu Sheng replied, "Your niece lives alone without a spouse. I wish to marry her. I have sent matchmakers multiple times, but she always refuses, citing the absence of elders to decide. Therefore, I hope you can speak on my behalf." Previously, the scholar from Liang did indeed have a niece who, after losing her mother at a young age, was raised by him until she returned to her own home at the age of 15. Later, the niece was captured in Jinan, her father was killed, and she was frightened. In her grief, she also passed away. The scholar said, "Her father is the one to decide, why come to me?" Zhu Sheng replied, "Her father's coffin has been moved by his nephew and is no longer here." The scholar asked, "Who does my niece rely on in the underworld?" Zhu Sheng said, "She now lives with an elderly neighbor lady." The scholar was worried that the living cannot matchmake for the dead, to which Zhu Sheng responded, "If you are willing to help me, please come with me to a certain place." So, he got up and took the scholar's hand. The scholar repeatedly refused and asked, "Where are we going?" Zhu Xing said. Just follow me. The scholar, feeling helpless, reluctantly followed him. They walked north for about a mile and came to a large village with about 100 households. They then arrived at a mansion, where Zhu Xing knocked on the door. An elderly lady came out and asked Zhu Xing what he wanted. Zhu Xing replied, "Please tell Miss that her uncle has come." The old lady went back inside and soon returned to invite the scholar into the house. She looked at Zhu Xing and said, "The two thatched huts are too narrow. Please wait outside, Mr. Zhu." The scholar followed the old lady into the house and saw two small cottages in the half-acre deserted courtyard. His niece greeted him at the door, tears streaming down her face, and upon seeing her, the scholar also shed tears. The dimly lit room revealed her beautiful and elegant appearance, unchanged from before. With tears in her eyes, she stared at the scholar and inquired about the well-being of her aunts. The scholar said, "They are all safe and sound, but my wife passed away." His niece choked with sobs and said, "I was raised by you and aunt, yet I haven't had a chance to repay you. But now, I've died prematurely. Last year, my cousin moved my father's grave and left me behind without any care. I am hundreds of miles away from my hometown and feel utterly lonely and abandoned. Now, uncle, you haven't abandoned me even after my death. You've also burned paper money for me, which I have received." The scholar conveyed Zhu Xing's message to his niece, who lowered her head in silence. The old lady said, "Previously, Mr. Zhu sent Madame Yang to visit a few times. I thought it was a good thing, but Miss refused to act rashly. Now that her uncle is here to intervene, Miss can finally be satisfied." As they were talking, a young woman of 17 or 18, followed by a maid, suddenly pushed the door open and entered. Upon catching sight of the scholar, she turned to leave. The niece grabbed the woman's sleeve and said, "There's no need for this. This is my uncle, not a stranger." The scholar bowed and greeted the woman, who also returned the courtesy respectfully. The niece said, "This is Jiuniang, originally from the Gongsun family of Qixia County. Her father was once a member of a wealthy family, but now they've fallen on hard times and are destitute. She often comes to visit me." The scholar stole a glance and saw Jiuniang smiling with crescent-shaped eyebrows, blushing shyly like the morning glow. She truly resembled a celestial being. He then said, "Just by looking at Jiuniang, one can tell she's a belle. How can a girl from an ordinary family be so graceful and beautiful?" The niece laughed and said, "She's also a scholar, adept at writing poetry. I've even received her guidance before." Gongsun Jiuniang smiled faintly and said, "This little maid is speaking ill of others for no reason, making your uncle laugh." The niece laughed again and said, "My uncle has not remarried since the passing of his wife. With such a beautiful young lady, does my uncle like her?" Gongsun Jiuniang laughed and ran out, saying, "You little maid, are you out of your mind?" and left. Although the conversation seemed like a joke, the scholar did indeed have a strong affection for Gongsun Jiuniang. The niece seemed to sense this and said to him, "Jiuniang is unparalleled in both looks and talents. If my uncle does not mind that she is a ghost and harbors no suspicions, I will plead for your marriage to her in front of her mother." The scholar was overjoyed but also worried that humans and ghosts could not marry. The niece said, "Don't worry, you and Jiuniang have a predestined relationship from your past lives." So the scholar walked out of the door. The niece followed him and said, "In 5 days, late at night, I will send someone to fetch you." As the scholar walked out of the door, he did not see Zhu Sheng. He looked up to the west and saw the half-moon hanging in the sky. In the dim moonlight, he could still recognize the road he had walked before. There was still a mansion to the south, and Zhu Sheng was sitting on the stone foundation in front of the door. As the scholar approached, he stood up to greet him and said, "I've been waiting for you for a long time. Please come to my house for a while." So he took the scholar's hand and led him into the house, expressing his gratitude once again sincerely. Zhu Sheng took out a golden wine cup and 100 Jin pearls, saying, "I don't have any other good things, so I'll use these as the betrothal gifts for marrying your niece." Shortly after, he said, "There was wine at home, but those wines are from the underworld and cannot be brought out for you to drink. I really have no choice." The scholar humbly declined the wine, then bid farewell to Zhu Sheng and went home. Zhu Sheng accompanied him halfway, and the two parted ways. When the scholar returned to the temple, the monks and servants crowded around him, asking him all sorts of questions. The scholar concealed the truth and told the monks, "It's nonsense to say I saw a ghost. I just went to a friend's house for a drink." 5 days later, Zhu Sheng indeed arrived. He was wearing new shoes, fanning himself, and appeared very happy and content. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he bowed deeply when he saw the scholar from afar. Shortly after, he smiled and said, "Your wedding has been arranged and will be held tonight. Now, please accompany me." The scholar replied, "You haven't given me any response, and I haven't even sent the betrothal gifts. How can we rush into the wedding?" Zhu Sheng replied, "I've already sent the betrothal gifts for you." The scholar expressed his heartfelt gratitude and followed him. They went all the way to Zhu Sheng's residence, where the niece greeted them dressed in splendid attire and a smiling face. The scholar asked, "When did you two get married?" Zhu Sheng replied, 3 days ago." The scholar took out the Jin pearls Zhu Sheng had previously given him and asked his niece to exchange them for some money to buy clothes. The niece hesitated repeatedly but eventually accepted. She informed the scholar, "I conveyed your intentions to Madame Gongsun, and she was very pleased. However, she mentioned that she is elderly and has no other children. She doesn't want her daughter to marry far away. She hopes that tonight you can come and live with them as a member of their family. There are no men in the Gongsun family, so you can accompany my husband." Zhu Sheng then guided the scholar to Madame Gongsun's residence. As they reached the end of the village, they saw a mansion with its doors wide open and entered the hall directly. After a while, someone reported, "Madame Gongsun has arrived." They saw 2 maids supporting an elderly lady as she ascended the steps. The scholar prepared to bow, but the old lady said, "I'm old and have difficulty moving, so I won't bother you with the formalities." She then instructed the maids to set up the banquet for the scholar and Jiuniang. Zhu Xing had the servants bring out additional dishes and set them before the scholar, and he also prepared a pot of wine for him. The food at the banquet seemed no different from that on earth, but the host poured and drank her own wine, not urging others to drink. Shortly afterward, the banquet ended, and Zhu Xing returned home. The maids then led the scholar into the bridal chamber, where Gongsun Jiuniang was already waiting attentively by the splendid candles. The two of them expressed their affection for each other, enjoying each other's company and engaging in joyful and intimate activities. It turned out that Gongsun Jiuniang and her mother were originally supposed to be escorted to the capital. When they reached Jinan Prefecture, Madame Gongsun died from the hardships and abuse she endured along the way. Witnessing her mother's tragic demise, Gongsun Jiuniang, unable to bear the blow, took her own life by suicide. Jiuniang recounted her experiences to the scholar, speaking of her sorrow and shedding tears. As dawn approached, Gongsun Jiuniang urged the scholar, "You should leave now, so as not to alarm the servants." From then on, the scholar would come at night and leave by day, deeply enamored and devoted to Gongsun Jiuniang. One evening, the scholar asked Gongsun Jiuniang, "What is the name of this village?" Gongsun Jiuniang replied, "It's called Laixia Village. Most of the residents here are newly departed souls from Liang and Qixia counties, so the village is named accordingly." The scholar sighed repeatedly upon hearing this. Gongsun Jiuniang, too, expressed sorrow, saying, "The souls here are far away from their hometowns, lonely and without support. My mother and I also suffer from loneliness, which is truly saddening. I hope you can remember the bond between us as husband and wife, tidy up our remains, and bury them next to our ancestral graves. This act would give me a place to rest, and I will never forget this kindness for eternity." The scholar agreed to her request. Gongsun Jiuniang then told him, "Humans and ghosts live in different worlds. It's not suitable for you to stay here for long." With tears in her eyes, she gave the scholar a pair of silk socks and urged him to leave quickly. The scholar walked out with sorrow and despair, his heart filled with grief, anguish, and resentment. Unwilling to return home immediately, he went to knock on Zhu Xing's door. Zhu Xing came out barefoot to greet him, and his niece also woke up, her hair disheveled, asking the scholar what had happened. After much hesitation, the scholar recounted Gongsun Jiuniang's words. His niece said, "Even if Auntie didn't say it, I've been considering this day and night. This place is not the human realm, indeed unsuitable for you to dwell for long." Thus, they three cried facing each other, tears streaming down their faces. The scholar bid farewell amidst tears and returned to the human realm. Knocking on the temple gate, he lay down in his room, tossing and turning until dawn. He wanted to find Gongsun Jiuniang's grave but forgot to ask for the exact location of the tombstone. When he tried to find it at night, he only saw thousands of graves stacked up, unable to find the path back to the village. He sighed repeatedly, returning home with regret. Opening the silk socks, they fell apart at the slightest breeze, crumbling like ashes. Thus, he could only pack up and return to Donglu. After half a year, the scholar still couldn't forget about Gongsun Jiuniang. He came to Jinan again, hoping to meet her there. When he arrived at the southern outskirts, it was already dark. The scholar tied his horse to a tree in the courtyard and hurried to the chaotic burial ground. There, countless graves stretched on endlessly, overgrown with tangled weeds, and eerie ghost lights flickered, accompanied by eerie fox cries, making it a terrifying sight. Fearful and despondent, the scholar wandered around aimlessly, then turned his horse around, intending to return to Donglu. After walking about a mile or so, the scholar saw a young woman walking alone among the tomb mounds from a distance, her appearance and demeanor resembling Gongsun Jiuniang. He urged his horse forward to catch up, and upon closer inspection, it was indeed Jiuniang. The scholar dismounted and was about to speak to her, but she ran away as if they were total strangers. He tried to approach her again, but Jiuniang showed a furious expression and covered her face with her sleeve. Sobbing, the scholar called out, "Jiuniang," but Gongsun Jiuniang vanished without a trace. At the end of the story, the author also provides the following commentary. Since ancient times, there have been loyal subjects and filial children who were never understood or forgiven by emperors or fathers until death. Did Gongsun Jiuniang perhaps believe that the scholar betrayed the heavy responsibility of helping her relocate the remains, leading to lingering resentment that could not be dispelled from her heart? A person's intentions cannot be displayed like tangible objects. The scholar simply failed to find the tombstone, but to be resented in such a way is truly unfair. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale. Gongsun Jiuniang. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.